Welcome. On today's Gear Talk, we're going to be talking about how to get a heavy guitar tone, but more homing in on the basics on what equipment you need to be able to get that heavy tone and what purpose each individual equipment plays to the overall sound. This is really inspired by talking to people who are either new into playing music or outsiders looking in. When they see all this fancy stuff, and they just have no idea if it's even needed or if it's caught in that trap of just being a collector and just seeing fancy shiny things and not realizing the individuality and the effect they can actually have on your sound. I'll break it down as best as I can for you, and at the end I'll play a song, just jam out a few riffs as I like to do in all my videos, and we can take it from there. First point of conversation is the amp head. So here is my little dark terra orange amp head. I'm just going to run through the basics on how this works in an overall chain to give you an idea, and I'll try my best not to go into too nitty-gritty of the details of specs of this amp. So every amp will have three different major attributes to it. So they'll all have an input, which goes for the preamp. Then from the preamp, it will go into the EQ section. Then from there, it will go into the output. And it's broken up into those three things as a general rule. Because when you play the guitar, you get a very, very tiny little signal coming out of that guitar. And the first thing it does is, in this one, it will go into the first valve of this amp and really start to bring it to life. Then it goes into the EQ section, which that's where you can really push the gain on how much oomph you want to give it compared to the volume out, which is then when we get into the stage of distortion and dirty sound. Then it goes from there into the output. So when you're thinking about amp heads, every single one of them, or every different brand and model, is slightly different. So the different preamps are going to react differently to each guitar. Each little EQ section is going to be slightly different and have different responses to them, and the output is going to have a certain type of clarity to it. So when you're looking at it, if you're coming from an unknown pair of eyes, looking at a few different amps, you might think, why aren't you just going for that one? It's a hell of a lot cheaper compared to this other one. And it's all those little specs that we look for in our guitar tones that make us choose what we choose and what we really like. So that's the basic journey of how this works, where you've got, this one is super simple, but I absolutely still love it, where you just got a straight volume, a gain, and a shape, which is like an EQ curve, which is fixed, but it somehow just really, really works amazingly. So before we move on to actually showing examples, which I'll bring up on the computer in a minute, I want to have a quick talk about what a chain is. When we talk about a lot of our music equipment, we talk about chains. What a chain is the journey from the input source to the very last output source. So to keep it simple, if you have a guitar and you have the guitar run into a pedal, then the pedal will run into the amp, and the amp will run into the speakers, and the speaker makes noise. That's a simple chain. The chain starts with here, for 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we've got sound. Some chains, you might not have a pedal, and you just go straight guitar, amplifier, then speakers, and that's your chain. Pretty simple, but I won't explain that because I will be talking a lot using that terminology chain later on. So definitely want to clear that up first and foremost before we got stuck into it. So let's move on to the next part and break them all down a little bit more individually for you. Now to the fun part. So what I've done is I've set up a virtual representation of each different part that we're talking about. So the chain goes from the guitar into this pedal here, a distortion pedal. Then it goes into the amp head, and the amp head into the speakers. So just as we would do with external equipment. So let's run through all the different sounds and see what all the fuss is about that I'm making here. So the first sound we're going to have is just what it sounds like plugged in on its own. Not that heavy. We're talking about heavy tones here. So pretty straightforward, pretty flat, pretty mono, not that much characteristics to it. So let's run through and chuck in the amp head. So this is what it's like running through an amp head, which has a preamp, an equalizer, spectrum, as well as output boost. So it has a little bit more bite to it, a little bit more body to it, a lot more warmth. And you can really hear the preamp starting to manipulate the sound exactly how what we're attracted towards when it comes to guitar tones. So let's add the cab in now for the speakers and hear the difference there. And that really rounds it off nicely and gives it that nice fuller body, a more complete body, I should say. But in saying that, we're after distortion. So this is a nice basis to go on, but if we want to play something nice and gritty and grunty, doesn't quite do it yet. So let's turn these all off and let's go to the pedal. So let's say someone wanted to argue the fact to say, why don't you just get a pedal? Get a distortion pedal. It's called distortion. It does distortion. Plug that in and just go straight through. Don't worry about the rest. Save your money. So this is what it sounds like if you do that. A little bit fuzzy. It's nothing but fuzz. Not much body to it, not much real characteristics, just sounds like speaker cones being cut up and ripped apart by razors or pencils. Fun fact, which is what they used to do to create distortion before distortion pedals were around. But that might be a video for another time. So, going back to this and trying to stay on message. Let's get that fuzz and let's make it into something wow. So let's add the amp head now and hear the difference. So already there you can start hearing the preamp shape that fuzz sound to what we got into something that's a hell of a lot more attractive as a sound. So let's add the final coat, being the guitar cabs, and see how that sounds all together now. And that's how we get the full sound, by adding them all together. So just for argument's sake quickly, let's take out the amp head. So we've got now the guitar going into the pedal, going straight into the cab. It's got a lot of warmth. It's got too much dampering to it, and it doesn't have that that boost and that really, what's the best way to describe it? Like molding that the preamp and the amp head will bring. Plus, near to no volume. So we add the amp head back in. And then the grit comes in, and that really nice dirt with that more defined overall sound all comes together. So there's a really quick rundown of the three main components to getting a heavy sound, and their purpose in the chain and why they need to be there. So a lot of amp heads will have their own type of distortion, which means you don't need a pedal. Pedals do bring their own different characteristics, their own specs, and give it their own little boost. But they're not 100% necessary, depending on what equipment you choose to get and what results you're after. Now, in saying that, this wouldn't be my type of video unless it had me playing a song. So I'm going to use this settings that I have right here and get some drums and some bass involved and just write a couple of riffs for it to share. And then we'll go on to my final thoughts. I mean, it's a demonstration on my thank yous. So, yeah, without further ado, let's play some riffs. So there we have it. That is the basics on what equipment we use to come up with a basic heavy guitar sound, and the purpose that each individual equipment plays to create that overall sound in the chain, and most importantly, why we have it there. Because if you noticed, when you take something away or try to skip a part of the chain, it doesn't sound good. They all play their part for a pretty important reason. Now, once again, this is a basic, so there is lots of room for experimenting, adding a lot more pedals to the chain or altering it here and there to come up with some real creative ways and some amazing results on how to get things. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation and learnt something from it, or just enjoyed being along for the ride. I definitely appreciate it. Personally, I've yet to find that guitar tone for myself that has really blown me away. So I'm definitely still on that journey to find it. So yeah, I'll keep buying pedals, I'll keep trying stuff, I'll keep reading, and I'll keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because that's what we do as creative artists. So with all that said, if there's anything else you want to know or share with me, please let me know. If you want to see more videos like this or any other type of videos that I can help out with, please reach out and let me know. Until next time, stay safe.